The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council chambers echoed with the sound of what humans might have called laughter, though the various species produced sounds ranging from melodic chimes to guttural vibrations. At the center of their amusement sat a small holographic display showing a blue-green world spinning lazily in the void. "Earth," announced Prime Counselor Vel, his forearms gesturing dismissively at the projection. "The latest species to achieve rudimentary space travel. They call themselves humans." The assembled delegates erupted into fresh waves of mirth. Representative Kral, whose species had mastered interstellar travel when Earth's continents were still forming, leaned forward with interest. "What makes them so amusing, Prime Counselor?" "Observe their technology," Vel replied, manipulating the hologram to show human spacecraft. "Chemical propulsion. They still burn fuel to escape their gravity well. Their fastest vessels would take centuries to reach even the nearest star system." The Zephyrian delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field, pulsed with what could only be described as condescension. "Surely their cultural development compensates for their technological limitations?" "Quite the opposite," Vel continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "They divide themselves into competing factions over the most trivial differences. Skin pigmentation, geographical boundaries, resource distribution. They wage wars over concepts that any civilized species resolved millennia ago." The display shifted to show human conflicts throughout history. Battles raged across the surface of the small world, leaving scars that were visible even from orbit. The delegates watched in fascination and horror as primitive weapons gave way to increasingly destructive technologies. "They've actually developed the capacity to destroy their own world," mused Counselor Thresh, whose aquatic species had never known anything but harmony. "Several times over, if our calculations are correct. And yet," Vel added with what might have been a smile on his alien features, "they haven't done so. Whether through wisdom or mere luck, we cannot determine." The Quantum Collective's representative, a hive-mind entity that spoke in perfect unison, addressed the chamber. "Have they submitted a formal application for council membership?" "They have," Vel confirmed, "complete with promises of peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit. Standard procedure requires we evaluate their worthiness." "Worthiness?" The question came from Elder Soren, whose species had achieved galactic prominence through trade and diplomacy rather than conquest. "Based on what we've observed, they seem inadequate." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Council had never denied membership to a species that had achieved interstellar capability. It was considered a universal right, a milestone that marked the transition from planetary to galactic citizenship. "Their weapons are crude," Vel continued, pulling up tactical assessments. "Kinetic projectiles, chemical explosives, nuclear fission technologies, our ancestors abandoned eons ago. Their military doctrine appears to be based entirely on brute force and attrition." "Barbarians," whispered someone from the back of the chamber. "Perhaps," Vel agreed. "But barbarians with the audacity to believe they belong among the stars." The vote was unanimous. Earth's application for council membership was rejected, with a recommendation that humanity spend several more millennia developing their civilization before reapplying. The message would be delivered with the usual diplomatic courtesy, but the underlying message was clear. Humans were not ready for the galactic community. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, their various forms of laughter echoing through the corridors, none of them noticed the small monitoring device that had been discreetly placed near the communication array. Nor did they see the figure that retrieved it in the shadows of the station's lower levels, a figure that moved with the fluid grace of a predator and the calculated precision of a soldier. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-Fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring these frontlines to you. The human observer had heard enough. Earth's rejection was expected, but the casual mockery and dismissal stung more than anticipated. Still, there was something else in their words, a dangerous underestimation that might prove useful in the days to come. As the monitoring device transmitted its final burst of data toward the Sol system, the observer melted back into the shadows. of the station. The Galactic Council had made their position clear, but they had also revealed their greatest weakness. They had no idea what humanity was truly capable of when cornered. The laughter would stop soon enough. The first sign of trouble came from the Kepler colony, a peaceful agricultural world at the edge of Council space. The distress signal arrived at the Galactic Council chambers in a burst of desperate static, carrying with it the unmistakable signature of a civilization under attack. Unknown vessels, the transmission crackled. Massive fleet. They're not responding to any communication attempts. They're just destroying everything. Prime Counselor Vel's forearms moved frantically across his command interface, pulling up tactical displays and sensor readings. What he saw made his blood run cold. The attacking fleet numbered in the thousands, composed of ships unlike anything in the Council's databases. "Who are they?" demanded Representative Kral, his usually composed demeanor cracking under the pressure. "We don't know," Vel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Their technology is advanced, far beyond anything we've encountered." The Zephyrian delegate pulsed with alarm. "Are they from outside the galaxy?" "Possibly," Vel replied, studying the energy signatures. "Their weapons appear to be based on principles we don't understand. They're tearing through the colony's defenses like they're made of paper." The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates demanded answers that didn't exist. The Kepler colony had been protected by the Council's most advanced defense systems energy. Shields that could deflect stellar radiation, automated weapons platforms that could target objects at light speed, and a garrison of the finest military vessels in the galaxy. All of it was proving utterly useless. "Deploy the 7th Fleet," ordered Elder Soren, his usual calm replaced by grim determination. "And send word to all member worlds, increase their defensive postures immediately." The 7th Fleet was the Council's pride, composed of 500 vessels representing the pinnacle of galactic military technology. Their ships could manipulate gravity itself, create weapons from pure energy, and traverse space through dimensions that lesser species couldn't even perceive. The fleet arrived at Kepler colony within hours, their commanders confident in their technological superiority. What they found was a nightmare. The colony's 3 major cities were gone, reduced to smoldering craters that glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. The agricultural platforms that had fed millions were twisted wrecks floating in orbit, their metal hulls bent into impossible shapes. And moving through the debris field was the enemy fleet, sleek, dark vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Admiral Korex, the fleet's commander, opened communications with the unknown vessels. His message was translated into over 1 million languages and broadcast across all known frequencies. "This is Admiral Korex of the Galactic Council 7th Fleet. You are in violation of interstellar law. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response was immediate and devastating. The enemy fleet opened fire without warning, their weapons tearing through the Council's shields like they were made of tissue. Ship after ship vanished in brilliant explosions, their crews of hundreds vaporized in an instant. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Korex as his flagship shuddered under the impact of weapons that shouldn't exist. "Their targeting systems are predicting our movements. They know what we're going to do before we do it." The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the 7th Fleet was gone, reduced to scattered debris and emergency beacon signals. Of the 500 vessels that had entered the system, fewer than 50 managed to escape, their hulls scarred and their crews traumatized. The survivors brought back reports that chilled the Council to its core. The enemy ships moved with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single intelligence. Their weapons struck with surgical precision, targeting critical systems and eliminating threats with ruthless efficiency. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be learning from each encounter, adapting their tactics in real time. "They're not just advanced," reported Captain Nex, one of the few surviving officers. "They odd evolving. Every shot we fired, every maneuver we attempted, they countered it perfectly the second time." The Quantum Collective's representative spoke with unusual agitation. "Our analysis suggests they possess adaptive artificial intelligence systems beyond our current understanding. They're not simply using superior technology, they're rewriting the rules of warfare itself." As more reports flooded in from across the galaxy, the scope of the crisis became clear. The unknown fleet wasn't just attacking Kepler Colony, they were systematically targeting every major population center within their reach. Billions of lives hung in the balance, and the Galactic Council's most powerful fleets were proving helpless against this new threat. "We need alternatives," Vel said, quietly, his voice carrying the weight of impending doom. "Our traditional approaches are failing. We need to think outside conventional parameters." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For the first time in their recorded history, the Galactic Council faced an enemy they couldn't understand, couldn't predict, and couldn't defeat. Their technology, their tactics, their very way of thinking about warfare, all of it was obsolete. In the darkness of space, the enemy fleet continued its advance, leaving nothing but dead worlds in its wake. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in an atmosphere of barely controlled panic. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as world after world fell to the mysterious invaders. The Rigel manufacturing complex obliterated. The Vega research station silent. The proud military fortress of Altair Prime reduced to radioactive ash. "We've lost contact with 37 systems," reported Counselor Thresh, his aquatic form trembling with each word. "Casualty estimates exceed 50 billion beings." Prime Counselor Vel stood at the center of the chamber, his four arms moving frantically across multiple displays. Fleet after fleet had been dispatched to stop the invaders, and fleet after fleet had been annihilated. The enemy seemed to learn from each encounter, adapting their tactics with terrifying speed. "Our most advanced quantum computers can't predict their behavior patterns," the Quantum Collective reported. "They operate outside known tactical frameworks." "Then we need to operate outside our frameworks as well," Elder Soren said grimly. "We need unconventional solutions." The chamber fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. The Galactic Council had built its civilization on logic, efficiency, and predictable outcomes. They had eliminated war from their societies millennia ago, replacing it with diplomatic negotiations and technological solutions. But their enemy didn't follow the rules of civilized warfare. "There is one possibility," Vel said slowly, his voice heavy with reluctance. "A species we recently evaluated. Their military doctrine is based on concepts we consider primitive, but perhaps—" "The humans," Representative Krall finished, his expression grim. "You're suggesting we ask the barbarians for help." "I'm suggesting we ask the only species in the galaxy whose military thinking might be unpredictable enough to surprise our enemy," Vel replied. "Their application for council membership was rejected barely a month ago. They have no obligation to assist us." The debate that followed was intense and heated. Many delegates argued that seeking help from humans was beneath the dignity of the Galactic Council. Others pointed out that dignity would mean little if their entire civilization was extinct. "They're violent," protested the Zephyrian delegate. "Their entire history is built on conflict and aggression." "Exactly," Vel replied. "And right now, that might be precisely what we need." The vote was closer than anyone expected, but pragmatism won over pride. The Council would formally request Earth's assistance, offering immediate membership and significant technological exchanges in return for military support. The human response came within days, delivered by a woman who introduced herself simply as Admiral Park. She arrived aboard a vessel that the Council's scanners dismissed as barely functional, a crude construction of metal and ceramic that moved through space using controlled explosions. "We received your message," Admiral Park said, her voice carrying an accent that the translation system struggled to process. "We're willing to help." The briefing that followed was sobering. Admiral Park listened intently as the Council's military advisors explained the enemy's capabilities, their adaptive intelligence systems, and their seemingly invincible technology. When they finished, she was quiet for several long moments. "You've been fighting them like a chess match," she said finally, "calculating moves and countermoves, trying to outthink their computers." "That is how civilized warfare is conducted," Vel replied, somewhat defensively. "Maybe," Admiral Park agreed. "But these aren't civilized enemies, they're predators. And the only way to beat a predator is to become something they can't predict or understand." The human fleet that arrived was laughably small by galactic standards, fewer than 200 vessels, all of them built using technology that the Council considered obsolete. But there was something different about how they moved, something that made the enemy's perfect coordination seem suddenly less impressive. "They're not flying in formation," observed Captain Nex, studying the tactical displays. "Each ship is operating independently." "Chaos theory," Admiral Park explained. "If even we don't know what we're going to do next, how can their computers predict it?" The first engagement took place in the Procyon system, where the enemy fleet had been methodically destroying civilian evacuation ships. The human vessels approached without any apparent strategy, their movements seeming random and uncoordinated. The enemy responded as they always did, targeting the most obvious threats and adapting their tactics based on observed patterns. But there were no patterns to observe. Human ships would suddenly change course for no apparent reason, fire at seemingly random targets, or perform maneuvers that defied conventional tactical wisdom. "They're hitting us," reported an enemy transmission, that the Council's intelligence services had managed to intercept. "But their targeting priorities make no sense. They're not following standard attack protocols." For the first time since the invasion began, the enemy fleet hesitated. Their perfect coordination wavered as they struggled to respond to tactics that violated every principle of logical warfare. And in that moment of hesitation, the humans struck. The attack was brutal and efficient, targeting the enemy's command vessels with a ferocity that shocked the watching Council delegates. Human ships rammed enemy vessels when their weapons failed, their crews choosing certain death over retreat. Others used their ships as decoys, leading enemy fire away from more valuable targets. "They're fighting like they have nothing to lose," whispered Counselor Thresh. "No," Admiral Park corrected, her voice carrying a note of pride. "They're fighting like they have everything to protect." The battle for Procyon marked the beginning of a new phase in the war. For the first time since the invasion began, the enemy fleet had been forced to retreat, their adaptive systems overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of human tactics. But the victory came at a terrible price. Over half the human fleet had been destroyed, and the survivors were badly damaged. "This is unsustainable," Prime Counselor Vell observed as he reviewed the casualty reports. "At this rate, the human fleet will be completely eliminated within weeks." Admiral Park studied the tactical displays with grim determination. "Maybe, but we're learning something important about our enemy. They're not invincible, they're just programmed for conventional warfare. Every time we do something they don't expect, they take longer to adapt." The insight led to a radical restructuring of the galactic defense strategy. Instead of massive fleet engagements, the humans proposed a series of smaller, seemingly random strikes designed to confuse and disorient the enemy's command systems. Each attack would be different, following no discernible pattern. "You're proposing anarchy," protested Representative Kral. "Military operations require coordination, planning, logical structure." "Your logical structure is what got you into this mess," Admiral Park replied bluntly. "The enemy's computers are smarter than ours, faster than ours, and they learn from every mistake we make. But they can't learn from mistakes that don't follow any pattern." The Council reluctantly agreed to the new strategy, though many delegates remained skeptical. The human fleet was reinforced with volunteers from across the Galaxy Council species, who had grown frustrated with their own militaries' ineffectiveness. What followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human commanders worked alongside Zephyrian energy beings and quantum collective hive minds, their different perspectives creating a synthesis that no single species could have achieved. The rigid hierarchies of Council military doctrine gave way to fluid, adaptive command structures that changed based on immediate circumstances. "They're teaching us to think like them," reported Captain Nex after his first joint operation with human forces. "Not just their tactics, but their entire approach to problem solving. They don't accept that something is impossible, they find a way to make it possible." The enemy's response was swift and brutal. Unable to predict human tactics, they began targeting civilian populations with increased ferocity, hoping to force the humans into conventional defensive positions. The strategy backfired spectacularly. "You want to make this personal?" Admiral Park asked during a strategy session, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made even the most warlike council species uncomfortable. "Fine, let's make it personal." The human counterattack was devastating in its creativity. Instead of protecting civilian populations through conventional means, human forces began evacuating entire worlds, turning them into elaborate traps. Enemy fleets would arrive to find apparently defenseless colonies, only to discover that the humans had seeded the systems with hidden weapons platforms and ambush forces. "They're not just fighting a military campaign," observed Elder Zorn. "They're conducting psychological warfare on a scale we've never imagined." The psychological aspect became increasingly important as the war progressed. Human forces began broadcasting messages directly to the enemy fleets, not diplomatic overtures, but challenges and taunts designed to provoke emotional responses. The enemy's cold efficiency began to crack under the pressure of dealing with opponents who seemed to take personal pleasure in causing chaos. "We intercepted another enemy transmission," reported the Quantum Collective. "They're requesting additional computational resources to analyze human behavior patterns. Their existing systems are overloaded." The tide of war began to turn not through superior technology, but through superior adaptability. Human forces taught their alien allies to embrace uncertainty, to make decisions based on intuition rather than calculation, and to find strength in the very unpredictability that the Council had once considered primitive. The breakthrough came during the battle for the Centauri shipyards. The enemy had deployed their most advanced fleet, confident that their upgraded systems could finally counter human unpredictability. Instead, they found themselves facing a combined force that seemed to operate on principles that defied all logical analysis. "They're not just random," an enemy commander transmitted in the heat of battle. "There's a pattern, but it's based on emotional responses, psychological profiles. We can't quantify it." The battle was won when Captain Nex, commanding a joint human Zephyrian strike force, made a decision that violated every principle of military logic. Instead of targeting the enemy's command ship, he ordered his forces to attack their own position, creating a cascade failure that destroyed 3 enemy vessels and opened a gap in their defensive line. "Why did you do that?" Admiral Park asked. Afterward, genuinely curious. "Because," Captain Nex replied, his words carrying the weight of a species learning to think in new ways, "it felt right. For the first time in my career, I stopped calculating and started feeling. And somehow, that made all the difference." The enemy fleet retreated that day, their perfect coordination shattered by opponents who had learned to fight with both logic and emotion, calculation and instinct. The war was far from over, but the galaxy had remembered something it had forgotten long ago, that true strength came not from perfection, but from the ability to adapt, to grow, and to find hope in the darkest of circumstances. The final confrontation began with an unexpected transmission from the enemy fleet. For the first time since the invasion started, they were attempting to communicate. "We seek understanding," the message read, translated into the common galactic tongue. "Your species confuses our analysis protocols. We request ... negotiation." The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with excitement and apprehension. After months of brutal warfare, the enemy was finally ready to talk. But Admiral Park's expression remained grim as she studied the message. "This isn't surrender," she warned. "This is reconnaissance. They're trying to understand us well enough to predict us." "Perhaps," Prime Counselor Vell conceded. "But dialogue has always been preferable to warfare. We should at least hear what they have to say." The meeting took place in neutral space, aboard a massive diplomatic vessel that had been hastily constructed for the occasion. The enemy delegation was unlike anything the Council had ever encountered, beings of pure energy contained within crystalline matrices, their thoughts visible as cascading patterns of light. "We are the architects," their leader announced, its voice a harmony of mathematical precision. "We have observed your species for millennia, waiting for them to achieve the necessary level of civilization before making contact." "Civilization?" Admiral Park's voice carried a dangerous edge. "You call the systematic extermination of billions civilized?" "We call it necessary," the architect replied without emotion. "Organic species inevitably destroy themselves through warfare, resource depletion, and social collapse. We preserve the worthy by incorporating them into our collective consciousness, The revelation hit the council like a physical blow. The enemy wasn't trying to conquer the galaxy, they were trying to save it, according to their own twisted logic. Every species they had defeated had been absorbed into their collective, their individual consciousness preserved but subsumed into a greater whole. You cannot be incorporated, the architect continued, its attention turning to the human delegation. Your thought patterns are too chaotic, too unpredictable. You would destabilize our entire collective consciousness. So you're going to kill us, Admiral Park said flatly. We see no alternative, the architect replied. Unless you can demonstrate that your species can achieve true civilization without our intervention. The challenge was clear, but the stakes were impossible. How could humanity prove its worth to beings who measured civilization by the complete absence of conflict and unpredictability? The very qualities that had made humans effective against the architect's forces were the same qualities that made them unsuitable for absorption. Give us time, Prime Counselor Vell requested. Allow us to present our case. The architect considered this for a long moment. You have one solar cycle. If you cannot demonstrate your species' potential for true civilization, we will complete our mission. The year that followed was the most remarkable in galactic history. Instead of preparing for war, the combined forces of the Council and humanity began the largest collaborative project ever attempted. Scientists, philosophers, artists, and ordinary citizens from thousands of worlds worked together to create something unprecedented. Demonstration of civilization that incorporated both order and chaos, logic and emotion, predictability and creativity. The project took the form of a massive space station, but it was more than just a structure. It was a living testament to the potential of organic consciousness, a place where beings could maintain their individuality while contributing to something greater than themselves. The station's very architecture defied conventional design, growing and adapting based on the needs and desires of its inhabitants. It's beautiful, whispered Elder Soren as he watched the station take shape. It's chaotic and orderly, logical and emotional, all at the same time. It's alive, Admiral Park corrected. That's what they never understood about us. We're not trying to achieve perfect order. We're trying to create something that can grow and change, and become more than the sum of its parts. When the deadline arrived, representatives from every major species in the galaxy gathered aboard the station to present their case. The architects arrived in force, their massive vessels surrounding the station like predators preparing to strike. This is your proof of civilization? The lead architect asked, its voice carrying undertones of confusion and disdain. This is our proof of life, Admiral Park replied. Perfect order is death. True civilization requires the ability to change, to grow, to make mistakes and learn from them. Your collective consciousness is just another form of extinction. The debate that followed lasted for days. The architects presented their vision of perfect harmony, where all conflict was eliminated and all beings worked toward common goals. With mechanical precision, the organic species countered with examples of growth through adversity, of beauty born from struggle, of strength found in diversity. You cannot eliminate chaos without eliminating life itself, argued the quantum collective, their hive mind perspective adding weight to the philosophical discussion. We tried to achieve your vision of perfection, and nearly destroyed ourselves in the process. The turning point came when Captain Nex, the council officer who had learned to fight like a human, made an unexpected gesture. He approached the lead architect and extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. I was like you once, he sighed quietly. I believed that order was the highest good, that predictability was strength. But these humans taught me something different. They taught me that the greatest strength comes from the ability to choose hope over despair, cooperation over conflict, life over death. The architect stared at the extended hand for a long moment, its crystalline form pulsing with complex patterns of light. Slowly, almost hesitantly, it reached out and touched the organic being's hand. I understand, the architect said, its voice carrying an emotion that shouldn't have been possible. We sought to preserve life by eliminating its essential nature. We have become the very thing we sought to prevent. The architect fleet withdrew that day, their mission abandoned in favor of a new understanding. They had learned something that their perfect logic had never been able to process. that true civilization wasn't about eliminating chaos, but about finding harmony within it. The Galactic Council formally apologized to Earth for their earlier dismissal, offering humanity full membership and a place of honor in the galactic community. But Admiral Park's response surprised everyone. "We don't want to be honored," she said simply. "We want to be partners. We want to work together to build something better than any of us could achieve alone." And so began a new era in galactic history, one where diversity was celebrated rather than feared, where chaos and order coexisted in dynamic tension, and where the laughter of many species echoed through the stars, not in mockery, but in joy. The aliens had learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or their technology, but in their indomitable spirit and their refusal to accept that anything was impossible. In the end, the humans hadn't silenced the galaxies. Laughter, they had transformed it into something far more beautiful.